Root Riders with the log launcher is without a doubt the best strategy in the game right now. So in today's video, I'll be teaching you guys everything that you need to know to improve your attacks in ranked. I'll be covering different topics such as how to correctly spirit charge, where to use the log launcher, when to use the overgrowth spell, and so much more information. I'm so confident that this video will provide some value to every single person watching right now. So I want to strike a deal with you guys. If you think this video sucks and provided no value to your attacks, you have to dislike the video and unsubscribe. But if this video turns out to be useful for you, you must like, subscribe, and share this video with your clan mates. Seems like a pretty fair deal to me. Now this video is split into 8 segments, so feel free to skip to the part of the video that most applies to you. But first, I'll be explaining the army and talking about some substitute equipments that you guys can use. So let's get right into it. Alright, diving first into the army and some substitute equipments that you can use if you do not have all of the epics upgraded or unlocked. So let's start with the king. If you do not have the snake bracelet, you can go ahead and use the earthquake boots. They work just fine, but you do want to get the snake bracelet leveled up, and you can probably start using the snake bracelet when it's around level 23. As for the spiky ball, you are going to need the spiky ball. You could try and use a giant gauntlet or something, but quite frankly, without the spiky ball, you are going to struggle with those battle modifiers. Now, if you are going to be planning to use the earthquake boots, I would recommend using the phoenix on the king as opposed to the frosty, because of course the king is going to be slightly more vulnerable without that snake bracelet spawning in all of those mini tanks for him. So that is what I would suggest if you do not have the snake bracelet or the frosty upgraded. Moving on then to the queen, I assume most of you will probably have the giant arrow upgraded and probably also the giant, but if you do not have the giant upgraded, you can also use the healer puppet. But the giant, quite frankly, is going to be necessary, especially if you're in legends, because of course those modifiers are absolutely brutal. Moving on to the warden, you are going to need the rage gem and you are going to need the eternal tome. Those equipments are really the driving factor of this army, so if you do not have these maxed out, you need to max them out as soon as possible. And finally, the royal champion. Of course, you do need the spirit fox. You are going to need the e-boots. If you don't have the rocket spear, you can use the haste vial, but quite frankly, the rocket spear is significantly better than the haste vial. Moving on then to explain the army itself and some of the troops that we may be talking a little bit about later in the video. So let's start with the super barbs. They are kind of cleanup support and also supporting your king on the outside of the base. The rocket balloons are again supporting your king, supporting your root riders, pushing your RC charge into a certain section of the base. That is what the rocket balloons are there to do. The 3 balloons are quite there just for tanking for any seeking air mines for the healers, and potentially also the sneezy, but we'll get into more details on how you're going to achieve that later into the video. Then you have the 5 healers, of course, going to be healing the root riders. Then you have the 4 root riders, which are going to be kind of the tanking, driving force of your army. You're going to have the Valkyries behind that. You're going to have those 3 ice golems, which are going to aim to tank for your log launcher, your queen, your king, your root riders, whatever it may be. They are a very versatile troop and are absolutely necessary in your army. Then we have the 3 headhunters, of course, against those pesky enemy heroes. Specifically though, the king and the minion prince are completely disgusting if you do not have any headhunters on them. And finally, we have the apprentice warden, and actually we do have a minion and an archer, which again are just used for outside cleanup. You know, you can use the archer to lure the ice golems onto the outside of the base or something like that, but generally they're pretty useless. Let's now move on to the spells. Then we have the 6 invis spells, mostly used for the RC charge. I feel like on average most RC charges are going to take about 5 invis spells, but we will talk more about the RC charge later into the video. You can of course also use the invis spells on your queen if she's getting targeted, your king, your root riders, whatever it may be, but of course they are predominantly used for the RC charge at the beginning of the attack. We have the recall spell for recalling the royal champion at the beginning of your attack. We have the earthquake spell, which is mostly used with the log launcher to kind of damage the buildings that the log launcher is going to be taking down. Again, we will be talking more about the earthquake spell later into the video. You can also use the earthquake spell for your RC charge to damage some of those buildings and take them down a lot quicker. Then we have the freeze spell, pretty self-explanatory. You're just going to be freezing anything that's scary. To be honest, it's mostly the crusher mortar, but of course that defense is leaving in a couple of days. Then you may just freeze, a scatter shot or the minion prince or whatever it might be. Quite a versatile spell. Then we have the skeleton spell, again quite versatile, normally used though to help your log launcher at the start of the hit tank the monolith, tank a ricochet cannon, stuff like that. Moving finally on to the siege machines and the CC troops, we have the 3 Yetis, which are mostly going to be coming out of your lug launcher. We can alternatively use the troop launcher, and that's the same exact story. The Yetis will of course come out the troop launcher and provide some additional help to those root riders through the base. Then we have the poison spell, which of course is for poisoning the enemy CC. Normally you want to be poisoning the enemy furnace, and if they don't have a furnace, you can always use the poison spell on an enemy hero or something like that. And finally we have the overgrowth spell, which again is something we'll talk a little bit more in detail later into the video, but it's mostly used for pathing for your root riders. Again, we'll be talking more about that later into the video. So this is the army explained for you guys. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments section below. But let's now get into the first section of this attack and explain how this attack strategy actually works. Let's go. Alright, let's start off with the RC charge, a very important aspect of your attacks that you need to get right. The way that I choose my RC charge is with the following 3 principles. I want my RC and my Fox to stay safe. I want to set the path for my root riders into the base, and I'll get a decent amount of value. In that order, safety is the most important aspect of your RC charge. If you lose your RC at the start of your attack, you are going to fail on the follow-up. And the same as if you lose your Fox, it's going to be a lot harder to triple because the Spirit Fox really is a saving grace for the RC in most situations. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, how do you achieve the safety? Well, I personally like to start off with single cycles on the outside of the base. Then I go to spamming invis spells as I am in this spirit charge here to make sure that my RC is staying safe. We'll go a bit more in depth into how to choose an RC charge a little bit later into the video because it is kind of centered around where you want to lug launcher on your attacks. To show you guys a different variant of RC charge, mostly common on rage bases, this is where I'm mostly going for value and pathing as opposed to safety. And as I say, normally on rage bases, this is when it is most applicable. It's quite difficult to keep your RC safe on this style of base, so instead I like to use the Earthquake spell, my Invis spells to try and take down a rage tower, and as you can see on this hit, I was able to do that quite nicely. And again, I'm kind of sacrificing the safety in this example. It gets a bit complicated, but if you are struggling, I would recommend you check out my RC charge guide video. But let's now get into the next section of the video. Okay, so now that we've talked about the army and also the spirit charge, I want to talk a little bit more about the lug launcher. Now, in 99% of my attacks, I'm going to be using the lug launcher. You might be thinking, how do I spot a lug launcher? Well, I went slightly more in depth in my video about the lug launcher about a week ago or so. So if you're interested in that, I'd also recommend you guys check out that video. But generally, you're doing the exact same thing with those 3 principles: safety, pathing, value. Of course, the lug launcher is a time-based siege machine, and so when it takes damage, you're going to get less logs, and hence you're going to get less value from the lug launcher because it's going to do less damage. So on this base right here, thinking about those principles, where would you guys go for the lug launcher? Hopefully you said from this top corner here, because it's nice and safe, not a lot of scary defenses in this area. You can get a ton of value by cutting through the middle of this area, and it is going to set the path for the root riders to either go this side of the base and this side of the base. So now that we've spotted our lug launcher, within approximately, the first 10 seconds of the attack, we want to use our RC charge to set up that lug launcher. So we want a lug launcher into this top section of the base here. Where are we going to RC charge, people? Hopefully you said into one of these expo compartments, because we want to make sure that we take down some of those defenses that are around where we want a lug launcher. For example, we don't want this expo or this expo to look onto our lug launcher. We want to have a nice tight path through the base. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'll put it in 2x speed for when I place down the RC. I decided to go over here. No real reason why. It's a 50-50. So I go with the RC. And again, I'm thinking safety. I want to try and keep my Fox safe. I believe I do run into some bait, which is a little unfortunate. And yeah, unfortunately, some more bombs. Then the RC goes inward. And we'll just wait for me to recall her in just a moment here to further explain the lug launcher. So there we go. I pop the Earthquake and then I recall. So one key thing is you want to be placing the Earthquake spell down first on your lug launcher. Then you want to be using your Giant Arrow. Then you want to place down the lug launcher. Now, the reason you want to place it in that order is because you want to try and distract these builder huts as much as possible. Let's say, for example, you went with the giant arrow first. These builder huts here would instantly target the buildings that you want to take down. If you go with the earthquake spell first, then of course these builder huts are going to be distracted on, these buildings here because they target the building that's closest to them. So that's why you guys want to go with the earthquake spell first. Makes sense? Cool. Next thing I want to talk about then is the queen arrow. It can take some practice to get it done, but it's very easy to practice the giant arrow. Just hop into some friendly challenges. I don't know, select a building. Let's go for this gold mine. And then select a building you want to try and hit. Let's say this ricochet cannon. And try and line that up in your head until you get it perfect. And you can do these giant arrows nice and quick. Now, I'm not sure I did it on this base. I didn't. But for obvious log launchers, people like to try and bait the Sneezy. Of course, the Sneezy is quite a strong pet. And so sometimes in my videos, you'll see me place down a balloon and then placing down my queen and popping the giant arrow. That is solely to protect the Sneezy from 2 seeking air mines, which is enough to take down the Sneezy. I'm sure if you guys have watched enough of my videos, you will have seen me do that before. In this case, I didn't, but you can also use your balloons in order to tank for the Sneezy at the log launcher stage of the attack. Hopefully everything is making sense so far. Again, I go a little bit more in detail to the log launcher in one of my previous videos. And as you can see, giant arrow, I damage all these buildings here. I want to damage the buildings that my log launcher is going to take down. Then I go with the log launcher, and I'm just patient here for a moment. I want to make sure that this log launcher is going to take down this multi-arch tower so that I can nice and cleanly path into this mortar. Now, when I say the factors of the RC charge and the log launcher, you think pathing. So with the RC charge, you're trying to set the path of the log launcher to be nice and smooth through the base, trying to keep it as safe as possible. And then on top of that, you kind of want to use the log launcher and the RC charge to path the root riders. So in this case, the RC's path this area here, the log launcher is going to path this area here. So we've got this really set entry into this expo over on this side of the base. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about pathing. Now, just quickly, before we do advance in this replay, I know that a lot of you guys do struggle with this army. I literally have over 100 attacks of this army on my channel. And for those who don't know, I timestamp all of my videos, labeling in each attack what style of base it was. So if you do struggle on a certain style of base, I highly recommend you try and find it in one of my previous videos. Just a little something, a little top tip for you guys whilst we're talking about the log launcher here. Anyways, let's jump right back into the replay. I decided to take nice Tesla again because I want my root riders to path right nicely into the ricochet cannon in this example. I go with my balloons first, then my healers. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about the root rider entry and everything like that a little bit later into the video. And just keep our eyes solely focused on the log launcher for the sake of keeping all of these segments of the video nice and compact. This segment is the log launcher. Then, of course, we'll talk about other stuff later in the video. But as you can see, the log launcher does go into the base and the Yetis come out. Now, in general, you don't want the queen to go with the log launcher and the Yetis in the core. Reason being is that the queen is really quite brittle, as you guys know. She doesn't have a lot of health, but she does deal a ton of damage. So in an ideal world, when setting up your log launcher, you want to try and push the queen with the root riders. Now, in most cases, you're not going to be able to do that, but just in general, if you can let that happen, that is what you want. But that pretty much covers the log launcher in terms of basics. And again, most of this army is all about experience. In Legends, you only have 30 seconds to plan. So if you're new to this army, you're going to struggle to plan in those 30 seconds. But the more that you use this army, the more you practice in FCs, the more of my videos you watch, the better that you'll get at this army. So that covers the log launcher. Let's now hop into the next segment of the video. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is when to not use a log launcher and also the root rider entry. A bit of a two here, but we're going to start off with talking about when to not use a log launcher. Let's just pause for a moment so I can explain without the pressure of the RC hitting that Tesla. So, the reason why on ring bases that log launchers, aren't as effective is because you're kind of limited to the defenses on these rings on the outside of the base, right? And so normally, as you can see, these rings on the outside are only about 2 buildings wide, or, 2 buildings, and then you're at the town hall with a log launcher. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So the reason why the log launcher isn't as effective here is because its value is very limited to these outside buildings here. Normally only 2 buildings of value. Now when you think about diamond bases with the town halls on the opposite side of the base, and you've got a ton of log launcher value down here, because you can kind of log launcher through the entire base, and you're not really limited to these 2 or 3 buildings that you can normally get with the log launcher. So normally on a ring base, that's when the log launcher is going to be a lot harder to set up. And in this attack here, I did not use the log launcher. So I want to show you guys this attack here. Also kind of explain the Root Rider entry a bit more. But again, with these ring bases, the log launcher isn't as good. If you are going to be using a log launcher, I feel like the key purpose is definitely to take down the Town Hall. You know, normally you'll use the Rocket Spear to take down the Town Hall. But with only one Overgrowth spell, you know, you don't really want to waste an Overgrowth spell on the Town Hall. So that is why on ring bases, normally you're getting 1 to 2 key defenses, but your main target is trying to get the Town Hall down with your Yetis, your Giant, your log launcher, Giant Arrow, etc. Hopefully that makes sense. Moving on to this replay then, I aimed for this Rage Tower. Not really a safe Spirit Walk, but we've already talked about that earlier in the video, where I talked about the RC charge and why I decided to go for this entry. I've already used the Earthquake spell on the RC charge, which means my log launcher is not going to be as effective again, because it's going to take a lot longer to take down those defenses. So as you can see, in this case, I got a little bit baited with the RC charge, and I decided instead of using the log launcher to use my Giant Arrow to finish off those buildings there. Now, as you can see, the log launcher that I have in terms of options is over here, where it's not very safe. You know, the Giant and the Queen are all the way over here. And on top of that, again, the value isn't awesome. It's only really a Monolith and an Expo. It's quite unsafe, which is why in this attack here specifically, I quickly decided to switch away from the log launcher. Now, I think in this case, unfortunately, the Queen and the Giant actually walked to this side of the base here. I was hoping they wouldn't do that, but I definitely made the situation worse by going with my Root Riders too early. But yeah, you can see how I'm choosing the Troop Launcher here. Not really that great value. We've already used the Earthquake spell, and it's a ring base, quite limited log launcher value. Now, to talk briefly about the Root Rider entry, I feel like it's not really as important anymore. But in general, you don't want to be entering into high amounts of damage. Do you guys see how in this space, I entered into this kind of side compartment here, which only contains an Expo and an air defense? That's the kind of entries you want to be going for. You don't want to be entering with your Root Riders into these giant Rage Towers, because that's when they're very quickly going to get overwhelmed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that why a little bit later into the video. But it does kind of link with the king timing and the king placement, which again is a later segment of the video. So in general, when you're looking for an entry, try to not aim for something that is a high amount of damage. Now in this case, yes, the Monolith is quite scary, but in general, there's really not a lot of damage here apart from the Mono and of course the Town Hall and the Crushing Mortar, which I've already overgrowth. And another rule of thumb for the Root Riders is generally try and avoid the Fire Spitters. Don't do this religiously though. Sometimes, or most of the time really, the entries behind the Fire Spitters are almost always trapped with baits for the RC charge, and you can also get your healers baited with red air bombs, seeking air mines, all the rest of it. But generally, if you can avoid at least one Fire Spitter, that's good. You never want to be sandwiched between 2 Fire Spitters in a base, and as I say, normally you want to be trying to aim for 1 Fire Spitter. So again, I don't want to go too deep into this base here, into this attack here, without, you know, kind of moving on to a different segment. But do you guys see how my entry here, quite slow, not a whole lot of damage, and as I enter into this additional damage, that's when I'm going to be starting to use my abilities, my Eternal Tome, etc. Unfortunately, in this case, my healers aren't really doing me any favors. You, of course, want the healers to heal the Root Riders, and sometimes they're dumb and they'll heal like the Diggy or a Yeti or something in there. It sucks a little bit. And of course, my Queen and my Giant walking over here probably wasn't the best attack in the world, to be quite honest with you guys. But it does clearly demonstrate how you want to be entering the Root Riders. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about the follow-up, the spell placement, the Eternal Tome timing, and the King timing a little bit later into the video. So let's now get into the next segment of the vid. Okay, so diving back into the exact same replay, I want to show you guys the King placement and timing. This is very specific and it is more important than people think. You want the King to run along the outside of the base, alongside the Root Riders, not ahead, not behind, but alongside the Root Riders, so that he can tank some of this damage. As you can see right now, this multi-arch tower is completely focused on the King and not the Root Riders. That is what you want. You want an even distribution of damage, some damage on your King and some on your Root Riders. Now again, this comes back to why you shouldn't enter into high amounts of damage with your King, with your Root Riders, excuse me. Hopefully that'll be more obvious in just a second as to what I'm talking about there. But as you can see, my King's stepping a little bit too far ahead here. Luckily, the Root Riders, once they're past, once they're past, the Ice Columns move a lot faster. So, let's just imagine that we entered with the Root Riders into this Rage Tower. We would have the entirety of this Rage Tower, these buildings here, the Minion Prints, the Scatter Shots, on our Root Riders, right? Now, just watch what happens when we approach this Rage Tower from the side, right? We've got the Root Riders coming in from the side, not directly into it, from one of the sides, okay? Just watch. This attack wasn't very clean, because the RC charge didn't really go to plan. Obviously, the Queen walking over there and dying also made things a little messy. But look right here. This is very important. The King right now is tanking the Multi-Arch Tower, the Inferno Tower, and the Ricochet Cannon. Now, unfortunately, all the Root Riders have died, because I don't know what the Queen's doing over here. She should have been over here and supporting the Root Riders, but for the sake of the video, it doesn't really matter. What you can see happening, though, is that these defenses here are being tanked for by the Root Riders. So the damage of this Rage Tower is being split between the King and the Root Riders, and that is what you want. So many of you guys say your Root Riders get overwhelmed on Rage bases and stuff. Well, if you're entering into a Rage Tower, you're going to get overwhelmed, okay? Legends modifiers are crazy. Always try and enter into these Rage Towers from the side. And as you can see right now, this Ricochet Cannon is being tanked for by the King, for the RC, for the Root Riders, and you can see that the RC is able to stay alive for a lot longer because the King is continuing to tank this Ricochet Cannon. Now, yes, this attack did get very close, not very clean on my part, but it does definitely show some of these key basic skills that you guys need to learn for your Legends hits. So that is that segment there about the King placement and timings. It's really important. You want the King to move alongside the Root Riders so that he can tank some of that outside damage and not have all of those buildings concentrated on the Root Riders. If you place him too late, the Root Riders can run ahead and die. If you place him too early, the Root Riders can go forward. He can go forward, die, Root Riders go forward after he died, and then he just won't have any tanking for those outside defenses. That is super important, and it's definitely something that's overlooked by a lot of you guys. Hopefully now you know, but definitely try and keep your King alongside the Root Riders. It's a difficult skill to learn, and it might take some time, but that is super important. So without further ado, let's move into the next segment of the video. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the Overgrowth timing and the Eternal Tome timing. They do work together. Now, here's a top tip for you guys whilst watching the RC charge play out here, which you saw previously in the RC charge section of this video. In terms of the Overgrowth spell and the Eternal Tome, you never want to have the Overgrowth spell active on buildings at the same time as the Eternal Tome. The reason being is that you're kind of missing out on that value with the Eternal Tome if you have buildings Overgrowth. Because, of course, the Eternal Tome is, giving you guys that invincibility, so you can deal with the damage that normally you would want to Overgrowth because you have that invincibility. Hopefully that makes sense. To talk a bit more about the timings, personally I like now to use the Overgrowth spell first, and then the Eternal Tome pretty much directly after that. Now, this does vary for base to base, which is why I suggest to you guys, you do watch some of my videos and kind of figure out what I'm doing in terms of my approach. But in this case, as you can see, I go with the Overgrowth first. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to path my Root Riders into this Town Hall. Then we're going to circle back to that core and use our Eternal Tome to kind of push through all these back-end defenses. Now, the Overgrowth spell has two purposes: pathing and damage reduction. In this case, I'm reducing the damage on my Root Riders by overgrowthing this Ricochet Cannon, the Inferno Towers, and I'm also pathing my Root Riders into the Town Hall. Then, as you can see, the Overgrowth spell wears off. I don't need to pop my Eternal Tome yet because my Root Riders aren't yet getting overwhelmed, so I can wait until we more reach this back end of the base. And you can see just how quickly we were able to get through that really scary looking core with those Inferno Towers and those Ricochet Cannons. Not really scary at all if you can time the Overgrowth spell to where it'll wear off and you'll instantly turn in and grab those defenses that are in the core. Again, something that's hard to learn, not really something that can be taught in a video, in a day. It's kind of something you need to learn over time. When should you be timing your your Overgrowth spells? And again, watching Clash of Clans YouTube videos is always going to help you out. Anyways, you can see now I'm moving into the back end of the space. My Eternal Tome here was a little bit early. I should have waited maybe until I reached the Crushing Mortar or something like that. And my... Oh, okay, hopefully that didn't end anything. My iPad is low on battery. I need to charge that. Let me just put that in right now. Okay, we're all good. So, as I was saying 5 seconds ago, my Eternal Tome was a little bit early here. But hopefully you guys can see how doing the Overgrowth spell first, mostly the pathing through the base, then using the Eternal Tome, your hero abilities, to push through effectively the rest of the base as a whole. And you can see right now, definitely my tunnel tome was a little bit too early. Probably now would have been a good time to pop it. And the only other real thing that we can talk about with this army is the spell usage, unless I'm missing something. So that is going to be the final segment of this video. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use your spells, your free spell, your skelly spell, your earthquake spell, etc. And then hopefully that will help you guys out in your attacks. But as you can see, unfortunately, things do fizzle out. Again, I think my vulnerability was way too early here. But this was a pretty crushing 3-star with 3 heroes and a bunch of giants and yetis alive in the end of the hit. So without further ado, let's get into the next segment of the video. Okay, so the final thing that I want to talk about with this army is spell usage. In other words, how do you use all of your spells? Well, as I said at the start of this video, you do have these 6 invis spells. Now, they are predominantly used for the RC charge. That being said, you do not want to try and use all 6 invis spells if you just don't need to. Going further into your spirit charge can put your Fox and your RC at even more risk, because you obviously have more chance of taking damage and getting baited and stuff like that. And so I always recommend don't ever try and use all 6 invis spells on your RC charge if it isn't necessary. And as you can see in this case here, there is no point for me going for another invis spell because I'm just going to get a mortar down. It's not worth the investment. Save your invis spell. Now, on to the next spell, of course. We're going to use our recall spell 100% of the time to recall our RC. We have the earthquake spell, which we've already talked about. You use it for the log launcher, or you can use it for the RC charge if you're not able to spot any value with the log launcher on the specific base. You have the free spell, which again is very versatile, and you also have the skeleton spell. The poison spell is pretty much exclusively used for the CC, that being furnaces most predominantly. If there isn't a furnace in the CC, I always recommend that you save your poison spell and use it on the enemy queen, or the enemy minion prince, or the enemy king, whatever hero it might be, because the ice columns are quite easy to deal with. They don't actually do any damage, they just slow you down, and so probably don't use the poison spell in that scenario. Anyways, let's see what I do on this base here. As you can see, I presented a balloon, as I was talking about. There were some Seeking Air Mines. This guy trying to bait my Sneezy. So I do that, put in some Seeking Air Mines. Now you can see I go with the Earthquake spell here. Now, I'm trying to get on the Crushing Water. And so what you can see here is that the Giant is going to get in range of this multi-arch tower. The Crusher's going to shoot one shot and it's going to hit my log launcher. I swear to you guys, the Crushing Water is ridiculous. So in this case, I used the free spell on the Crushing Water. Obviously, there isn't a lot of skeleton spell value in this area because there's a lot of splash damage. You know, the Town Hall, with one shot to any skeleton around that area, it's going to melt all of the skeletons in literally half a second. And so you'll see later into the video, later into the replay, where I actually use the skeleton spell. I'm always using it away from splash damage and only really using it near, only near, what are they called? Like single fire buildings, you know, monolith, ricochet cannon, scatter shot. Not really ever using it near multi-inferno towers, town hall, crushing water, fire spitters, stuff like that. So you can see in this case, I decided to freeze the crusher again to make sure it doesn't get any shots on my log launcher because safety is super duper important. And excuse me, what is wrong with me? I go with my king and I'm timing him so that he walks alongside the root riders. I think he gets a bit caught up in this case on some Tesla, so a little bit late in terms of my king timing here. You can see that the log launcher is going to take down the furnace, so I decided that I can save my poison spell for later into the hit. Again, I'm really trying to demonstrate how to use these spells for you guys. Hopefully it is making sense. Oh, I keep burping. Anyways, I go into the base here. As you can see, I feel like I've kind of overshot that Inferno Tower, and I just decided to overgrowth the entire core. Very late on the overgrowth spell there, but oh well. Then I pop the king ability, and now I'm looking for a good skeleton spell. Can you guys spot a good skeleton spell on the monolith? Why? There's no multi-targeting defenses currently up, available, working in the area. So this is going to be a really good skeleton spell for me. And then you can see I have an invis spell left over, which I'll probably use later into this hit. Doesn't really matter. And again, I'm going with the overgrowth spell first, and then afterwards I'm probably going more for the Eternal Tome. So that is everything to cover on this army. This does scrape the surface in terms of, you know, how to attack different styles of base, how to attack poison bases, how to use the log launcher on poison bases, you know. There's definitely a lot of other things I could cover on this topic of my army. So if you guys want to see that, let me know in the comments. Additionally, if you guys want to get one-on-one coaching with me, you can do so by joining the link in my description. Link in the description to join my Discord server, sorry. And you can get one-on-one coaching with me, and that'll kind of give you some more personalized feedback. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely check that out. But apart from that, as I said at the start of the video, if this video has helped you out, please make sure to like, please make sure to subscribe. We're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers, and I'm pretty close. I think I'm about 400 subscribers away from that. Let's do it, guys. I've got a massive 10k subs special video lined up for you guys, just waiting for me to hit 10,000 subscribers, which is bonkers, by the way. So yeah, if you guys have any further questions, let me know in the comment section. This video took ages to put together, getting the footage, doing the voiceovers, doing the voice recordings, you know, even just figure out what you're actually supposed to do, the log launcher, the RC charge. Oh my gosh, you don't even want to know. So please do like the video and maybe share with a friend, you know, in your clan. Hey guys, check out this guide. This guy's pretty good at Root Riders. You can improve using this guide, maybe. But overall, thank you guys for watching the video. If you are watching this right into the video, you are bonkers, because I'm now yapping and probably most people have clicked off by now. So thank you and goodbye.